Good morning. Good morning. I am so honored to be here. And thank you, Christine, for inviting me.
Thanks for coming.
I'm gonna start my talk because I could talk for a lot longer than 20 minutes about this topic. It's a very exciting topic to me. And I really want to acknowledge Keith, who has contributed a lot to my thinking about this topic. And you all are fortunate to have Keith, as you already know, Keith and Christine as members of your congregation. So I want to start by asserting that human beings need community. We need community for well-being. And so this topic is important to all of us as a way of helping support our own health and our own feeling of comfort and peace in the world. And a system of governance that supports community is really critical. It's an important, not the only ingredient for a community, but it's one of the essential ingredients for a community that supports well-being. So this is an important topic. I'm going to start by defining some terms, and then I'm going to focus a bit on two systems of governance that we have discussed a lot in the community, which is the community where I met Keith and Christine. Burns Village and Farm is a forming co-housing community in Dixon County. And we feel very fortunate to have had Christine and Keith on the journey with us and helping us to think through some of the decisions that lay the foundation for that community. So I'll talk about two systems of governance. And I'll talk a bit about what makes it hard. The fact that we're human beings makes it hard to have a system of governance that really can be served in the community. So the first term I'll define is community. So I would say a kind of standard definition of community is it's a group of people who share something, generally geographic proximity, they live near one another, so that's kind of a common definition of community, or they might have common interests, like a community of banjo players, or they might have social ties, like people who belong to a particular religious organization or political party. They may or may not engage in communal activity. They have some kind of general sense of belonging to a group as a common shared interest. I want to bring it up a level and say another definition of community that was generated by a friend of mine in Nashville, also a psychologist, is a feeling. A community is a feeling that members have of belonging, a feeling that members matter to one another and to the group, and a shared faith that the members' needs will be met through their commitment to one another. So that may feel familiar to you as a member of this. Next, I want to talk about resilience. So many people think about resilience as being like a tree that bends when the wind blows, or some entity that bounces back after some kind of a crisis or a challenge. Something gets broken and it gets repaired because the entity is resilient. An organization faces some financial crisis and people rally around and find a way to turn the tide so that the organization continues to move forward. So that's part of resilience. But I'm going to borrow from another psychologist, Bob Doppelt, who wrote a book called Transformational Resilience. And Bob Doppelt said, this is the ability to constructively cope with adversities and use them as catalysts to grow, to increase personal, social, and ecological well-being, and to go beyond, substantially above pre-crisis level. And I'm going to guess, Christine, that many people here know your story. Christine faced a fairly major medical crisis, and I would say, to me, you are an example of transformational resilience. So in this framework, everyone can learn how to use adversities as transformational catalysts to find new meaning, new direction, new hope in ways that motivate them to increase their social and emotional well-being. And so that's the kind of resilience I've talked about coming up a notch for community, coming up a notch for resilience. And then governance is, I would say, a system of rules, processes, procedures, to some extent, social norms used to direct and hold a group together, to give people a sense that they know what to expect, how the organization is going to function. It involves a decision-making. It involves a way of holding people accountable. This is what you're expected to do. So it can involve roles, it can involve strategic direction. There may be some way of the language that I read was enforcing compliance. And I would say that compliance or adherence to some kind of social norms is part of governance as well. So that people have a sense of when they're in line and when they're out of line. So with those three definitions kind of on the table, my opinion of how I'm using those words, I'll talk about two systems of governance Keith and I have talked a lot about. The first one is modified consensus. There is a YouTube video that I really like by another psychologist, Tim Hartnett, called Consensus 101. You can Google it. It's about an hour-long video that describes this process of coming to a decision as a group about matters that affect the whole group. And modified consensus means that at the end, we may not have 100% consensus. We have a kind of a backup plan. If we have a reason to make a decision before we've achieved 100% agreement about a course of action, the group decides what will be the decision plan. The decision plan will be, if we need to make a decision by the end of March about this, if we haven't reached consensus, we'll see if we have 90% agreement about a particular course of action. So it gives, in a way, it gives an alternative to continuing to work towards consensus. What I think is most valuable about this idea of consensus is that the process gives people an opportunity to live out certain values that they share. It's good to have people trained to do this, by the way, and there are training programs for achieving consensus. And so according to Tim Hartnett, the values that underlie this approach to governance include inclusiveness. The idea that everybody who's affected by the decision gets to participate in making the decision. This enhances group cohesiveness. It's part of building a resilient community because people feel like they belong, that their opinions and their feelings matter. Another value is participation. Everybody is going to be affected by the decision to participate in the decision. And that means that it may take time because some people process information at a different pace. Some people prefer to talk one-on-one when they're thinking about what course of action they want the group to pursue. And so that value of participation mandates, in a way, that the process takes time enough for people to participate in a way that feels comfortable to them. A third value is collaboration, that the group is going to participate in generating ideas that we will work on together to refine. So there's this sense that we want people to contribute and to understand that in the end, the decision that we make may not be what someone anticipated in the beginning. So the first idea that comes out might not be the decision again. A fourth value is equality. Everybody's opinion is as valid and as important as another's. It doesn't matter if you've been a member of the group for 6 weeks or 6 years. We want to hear from you. Your opinion matters. Another value is process. Now, I've been in groups where some people can get very frustrated by the idea that we're going to take time to make this decision. It's much quicker to say, all in favor, say aye. The ayes have it. You don't need process to get to a decision in that kind of a governance system. But in that kind of a governance system, you might not hear everybody's voice. The best idea might not have even emerged. And so the process is valuable. Process, the taking of time to listen to each voice, to hear different ways of solving the problem. It gives people much more of a sense of being included in the group. It can be frustrating for some people to engage in decision making. It takes time, but it does require cooperation. And in the outcome, I contend, it helps build a more resilient community. Then a really critical part of consensus decision making is whole group thinking. And that means that not only am I thinking about what I or my family might want, but I'm thinking about the group. So I'm thinking this whole group, I want this group for people to feel included. I want the wisdom of individuals in the group to be put forth. So whole group thinking has to be part of everyone's thinking in order for this to achieve its best outcome. So I might think, well, the decision that I would like to see us make is the best decision, and somebody's offering something that's quite different. I have to step back and say, well, maybe there's some value in this other way of thinking in terms of the group that I haven't considered. So I need to listen and see how other people respond to it. So that whole group thinking is part of what gives this form of governance its power, because we are thinking about the community, not just ourselves. So the steps in a consensus process that are outlined by Tim Hartnett include an open discussion. What's the issue? What are the different approaches that people have suggested for this? Identifying needs and concerns. Somebody might say, well, I want the playground to be at the end of the street because I don't want to have to hear the noise. Somebody else might say, well, I want the playground to be where I can see my kids from my window. So people express their concerns, and we get to learn the whole group's diverse orientation to the situation. Then there's collaborative proposal building. Okay, I hear your point, what if we do this? So there's this sense of aiming to include the different perspectives and needs as we generate potential solutions. We test for consensus in our Burns Village and farm community. I think, Keith, you may have brought this to us. Thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down. And that gives us kind of a quick check. Just looking around the room, we can tell, or on the Zoom screen, we can tell what the spirit of the group is. And thumbs down, we need to address that. We need to understand why somebody's opposed. Why is this a problem for you? And then we modify the proposal to increase agreement and finalize a decision. That's the fast version of it. It takes a lot longer. The second form of governance, in addition to modified consensus that we are using in Burns Village, is sociocracy. And I really enjoyed learning more about sociocracy. It was a term that was first used, according to what my reading was, by Auguste Comte, a philosopher in the 1800s, but it really came into its current form in the 1980s with Gerard Edinburgh, who was maybe still is, I think he may still be alive, a Dutch engineer. And he grew up in a family with parents who were civic-minded, were activists. He was exposed to Quaker thinking. And also he's an engineer, and he was very interested in feedback loops. And so his family owned a business, and his father gave him the opportunity to take over the business, which was not doing well financially, and to run it according to the principles of sociocracy that he was developing. And he turned the business around in a year. And so in his way of thinking, there are core values that are not incompatible with consensus building. The main ones are equivalence. Everybody's opinion is equally valid. Transparency is really emphasized. Record keeping in a way that anybody has access to the meeting notes. And effectiveness. So he added this dimension, I think, to the consensus process, where we're probably trying to make sure that the group is using its time efficiently. And so the key components of sociocracy parallel in some ways, like I said, equivalence. Instead of consensus, the process used in sociocracy is consent. And consent is sometimes summarized, it's good enough for now. So we're working for a decision, recognizing that there may be many different solutions to our problem, but we're looking for one that's good enough for now, so we can move ahead. That's kind of the efficiency and effectiveness part of sociocracy. So objections, as with consensus, objections that are raised must have to do with the good of the group. And if somebody makes an objection, that person is responsible for identifying an alternative solution that would be better for the group. So that means somebody can't say that, you know, I don't like it, and then they're done. You have to come up with an alternative that meets your needs and that you see as meeting the community's needs better. This is actually an advantage to the community to have somebody who may be, you know, outside of a kind of a group think, let's get it done mentality, and sees a problem with the solution that's being proposed by the group. And says, you know, I think we'd all be better off if we chose plan B instead of A. And that's a service to the community. The circle structure is an important part of sociocracy and lends itself to efficiency. So organizations are structured into semi-autonomous groups that have very well specified domains of responsibility and authority. And there's a system of linkages so that the groups are linked together and are linked to a centralized group, facilitate communication and to, you know, to avoid kind of duplication of efforts. And that's a really important part of sociocracy. Just show of hands, how many people here know about sociocracy or read something about it? Okay. If I know knows a lot about it. So it's a very interesting kind of a structure. And I would say in Burns Village, we are shifting into that and continuously kind of clarifying. We call them teams. We have teams that have specific tasks. And so we talk to each other about, now, is this a decision that we can make without checking with the group, or is this a decision that we need to take back to the whole group for a vote or for a test for consensus? So it's a kind of an ongoing refinement of what the boundaries are for each of the circles. And there's a commitment to continuous improvement. So in some of the reading that I've seen, there is a circle that's devoted to the mission, monitoring the mission of the group, and saying, are we moving forward with this idea that we're not going to be done? We're not going to finish making all the decisions that has to make. As part of being a resilient community, we anticipate the need for change from people in the group changing their minds about things, new people coming in, as well as the context in which we're operating, constantly changing. So we have a group that focuses on, for the group, what is the mission of this group? And are we moving forward in the mission we've chosen? So we have my definition of terms, and that includes two different types of governance that I think support a resilient community. So what are some of the challenges? I don't know if I have to say too much about this. You may be thinking already yourselves, well, no, that sounds okay, but what about in practice? So we're human beings, and we all have, we come into the group with our unique versions of what we think is the best way to do things. Some of it is conscious, a lot of it is not. And so we are triggered many times by what happens in the group in ways that we may or may not understand, depending on our facility with self-awareness. And so sometimes things will turn us off, or we'll find ourselves objecting in a flash because of a reaction that we may or may not understand. Like we have people who come to Burns Village and Farm and say, it's going to be governed by an HOA. And we say yes, and I've gotten this in emails for a minute, I'm out of here. I don't want to be part of anything that has to do with an HOA. So their experience with an HOA has been terrible, and they don't want governance by an HOA. Well, our plan is to use a combination of Consensus 101 and sociocracy, which I think will make it different from a lot of HOAs because of this community level involvement. But we all have our reactions to things, and we may or may not understand them. So in order for this to work, people have to be willing to look inside and say, why am I reacting the way I am? And might this actually be a good idea? But I need that, I have to understand it. I want to understand myself better. It requires patience. As I mentioned, some people just are not very tolerant of the time it takes to achieve consensus. That means you have to listen to everyone. And for some people, that's the torture. They really don't want to take that time to do that. They'd rather be, gardening or, painting or listening to music. So that patience is a skill that it requires kind of, building up your skill to be patient, listen to other people, and really listen for the feelings that people may sometimes have difficulty articulating. because the community matters. And to build that resilient community, we need to give people that space where they really feel heard. Going back to Bob Doppelt, his book Transformational Resilience is really designed to help people develop the skills to participate in a resilient community. And so his contention is that everyone can become trauma informed, meaning that we recognize that many people, we vary in terms of our histories, the kind of trauma we might have experienced in our childhoods, but that contributes to our own history, and other people's history contributes to the triggers. What happens in the group conversation or doesn't happen that leaves people feeling vulnerable? And how do we address that as a community? That takes intention, and it takes skill. And when we take the time to do that, it enhances a feeling of safety and protection of the group, which then can build on itself, that people are more able to express what they care about, what they fear. And then the group benefits from having that deeper awareness, the individuals in the group. Everyone can learn how to use adversity as transformational catalysts to find new meaning, new direction, new kinds of hope in ways that motivate them to stay, in those moments where you're feeling like, okay, how long is this going to take? Well, it's because I see the benefit of it. I see the benefit to me when other people take the time to listen to me. And I see the benefit to the community, this welcoming feeling that you generate. The new people come in and they find themselves feeling at home pretty quickly because of this sense of safety and caring. So we need to learn self-regulatory skills. I know many of us practice to different degrees meditation, which is a really excellent kind of self-regulation skill where we just bring ourselves back to center. And as we practice, we get better at doing that more frequently. We recognize the trigger when it happens. I'm tensing up, I'm not liking it. So I'm breathing, calm myself down. I really want to listen to this person and understand what is their objection and what is their feeling. So there's the presencing skills, what Bob Doppelt calls presencing skills, that I'm here, I'm present, I'm listening, I'm tuned in. And then there's purposing skills, which has to do with how we work together to make meaning out of the collective and recognizing the values that we share and keeping them foremost in our minds, being actively engaged in ways that help the group to feel more hopeful. So in summary, I just want to say, I feel really passionate about this. I think groups help us develop our personal capacity to be in the space in a constructive way, in a helpful way, in a way that feels better to each of us. And I really hope that some of what I said this morning will be of use to you in the beautiful community that you are creating here. Thank you very much.
You.